What if I told you that a man who owned a private jet, a marble mansion, and more stock market millions than most countries once stood in the dark, afraid to turn on the light because he didn't want to see his own tears? What if I told you that a silk dress left in the corner of a penthouse could hurt more than bankruptcy, and that 2 crystal glasses on a kitchen counter could weigh heavier than a vault full of diamonds? This isn't just a story about luxury lifestyle, champagne nights, or a billionaire mindset. It's a story about a woman who believed in a man before he had anything, before the Rolls-Royce Phantom, before the Mediterranean yacht, before the generational wealth. They built an empire together. From a tiny apartment with water stains on the ceiling to red carpets and penthouse suites overlooking the skyline. Diamond necklaces. 5-star hotels. Investment empires. Fortune that multiplied overnight. From the outside, they had everything. But one unexpected night changed everything. A phone call. A hospital corridor. A silk dress folded in plastic. And suddenly, the man who conquered markets couldn't negotiate with destiny. You're about to see what happens when wealth survives, but love doesn't. When the empire stands tall, but the heart collapses. When a broken billionaire realizes that even all the money in the world can't buy one more minute with the woman God sent into his life. Stay with me until the end, because this story might change the way you look at success, love, and time. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because what you're about to hear is not just about money. It's about what money can never replace. He used to say that poverty had a smell, and he swore he would never breathe it again. Back then, their first apartment was so small that when she cooked, the whole place smelled like garlic and ambition. He didn't have a luxury lifestyle, didn't have a marble mansion, didn't have a Rolls-Royce Phantom parked outside. What he had was a restless heart and a woman who believed in his billionaire mindset before there was even a dollar to prove it. She would sit on the old couch, legs crossed, wearing a simple cotton dress, telling him, "One day, we'll laugh about this." And he believed her. Not because of confidence, but because she believed for both of them. The first deal he closed wasn't glamorous, not even close. It was a small investment, a risky move that could have broken them, but instead it multiplied. He celebrated with cheap champagne in plastic cups, laughing like he had just bought a private jet. She toasted to their future penthouse suite, even though the ceiling above them had water stains. That's the thing about vision. Sometimes it's stronger than reality. She would trace imaginary diamond necklaces around her neck and joke about Paris Fashion Week. He would promise her silk dresses and 5-star hotels. They were rich in dreams long before they touched real fortune. Years passed, and what began as late-night hustle turned into boardrooms and stock market millions. The day he bought his first Lamborghini Aventador, he drove straight home just to see her reaction. She ran her hand across the leather seats like it was sacred ground, but then she laughed and said, "It's just a car." That grounded him. Even as his investment empire grew, even as the black credit card stopped declining, she remained the same: soft voice, steady eyes, unwavering loyalty. Wealth changed their address, but it didn't change her heart. And that's what made everything work. Soon, they weren't just attending events, they were the event. Red carpet flashes followed them into gala nights filled with champagne and sapphire rings sparkling under golden lights. She would glide beside him in a silk dress that made headlines, diamond necklace resting gently on her collarbone. Reporters called them the definition of generational wealth, the perfect couple living the luxury illusion. But when the cameras stopped, she would take off her designer heels and sit barefoot on the balcony of their penthouse. "Promise me," she'd whisper, "we won't forget who we are." And he would nod, not realizing how fragile promises can be. The marble mansion came next: high ceilings, velvet curtains, a closet that looked like a boutique in Milan. He filled it with everything money could buy: gold watches, rare art, custom-made tuxedos. She filled it with warmth. Without her laughter echoing in those halls, it would have just been stone and glass. Sometimes, she would cook in that massive kitchen just to remind them of the old apartment days. 2 plates, 2 glasses, 2 dreams that had somehow become a fortune. And every time she smiled at him across that marble island, he felt invincible. He worked harder as the numbers grew bigger. The stock market became his battlefield, mergers his daily adrenaline. "Just one more deal," he would say, even when they already had more wealth than they could ever spend. She supported him, always did, But sometimes her eyes lingered a little longer when he left for another trip on the private jet. She wanted sunsets, not spreadsheets. She wanted presence, not presentations. And though she never complained loudly, the silence between her words started to stretch. Still, from the outside, they were untouchable. A legacy in motion. A fortune sealed with love. But here's what most people don't see about success. When you build an empire too fast, you don't always notice the cracks forming in the foundation. And while he was busy expanding his wealth across continents, destiny was quietly preparing a night that would change everything. Success didn't just knock on their door, it moved in and redecorated the entire house. The luxury lifestyle became their new normal, and what once felt impossible now felt routine. Private jets replaced commercial flights, five-star hotels became temporary homes, and the penthouse suite overlooked cities that used to exist only in their dreams. She wore silk dresses that flowed like liquid gold under chandelier lights, diamond necklaces resting softly against her skin. Cameras flashed, champagne nights stretched until sunrise, and the world called them unstoppable. But even in the middle of all that fortune, something subtle began to shift. Paris Fashion Week, Milan, Monaco, the Mediterranean yacht gliding across blue water like a floating kingdom, they were everywhere. He negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts from marble balconies while she admired sunsets that no stock market could measure. The red carpet loved her elegance, the headlines praised his billionaire mindset. Investors saw an empire expanding, journalists saw generational wealth, but only she saw the exhaustion hiding behind his sharp suits. Sometimes, while fastening her sapphire ring, she would look at him and say, "Do you ever miss when it was just us?" He would smile and answer, "This is for us." But deep down, he knew he was chasing something that had no finish line. He bought her a custom-made diamond necklace one night after closing his biggest deal yet. The necklace shimmered brighter than the city skyline behind them. She thanked him, kissed his cheek, but her eyes searched for something else, time. Not gold. Not jewels. Just time. Wealth has a strange way of distracting you from what truly matters, like velvet curtains hiding cracks in the wall. And though their mansion echoed with laughter during grand parties, the quiet moments between them grew heavier. There were champagne nights where everyone toasted to legacy and fortune, yet she would quietly step outside to breathe. On their Mediterranean yacht, she once held his hand and whispered, "Promise me we won't lose ourselves in this luxury illusion." He laughed gently, brushing it off, saying success demanded sacrifice. That's the thing about ambition. It convinces you that love can wait. And sometimes it can, until it can't. She wasn't asking for less wealth, she was asking for more presence. But presence doesn't show up on financial statements. Even their marble mansion began to feel like a showroom instead of a home. Designer heels lined the closet like trophies, silk dresses hung untouched for weeks because he was always traveling. The black credit card paid for everything except the one thing she wanted most, him sitting beside her without checking emails. She started leaving little notes on the kitchen island, playful reminders to slow down. "Dinner without phones tonight," one read. He meant to say yes. He really did. But another urgent meeting always came first. Friends envied their lifestyle, their private jet, their empire. They didn't see her standing alone on the balcony at midnight, watching the city lights flicker below. They didn't hear her sigh when the penthouse door closed behind him for yet another overseas deal. Luxury can be loud in public and painfully silent in private. And while he kept building wealth as if time were infinite, time itself was quietly slipping through his fingers. And then came the night he closed the biggest contract of his career, the one that would double his fortune overnight. He called her from the private jet, promising a celebration when he landed. She answered softly, said she was proud of him, said she loved him. Neither of them knew that would be one of the last times their voices would meet in the ordinary rhythm of life. The call didn't come with a warning, it came with silence first. He had just landed the private jet, still tasting victory, still imagining champagne in crystal glasses inside their penthouse suite. His phone buzzed again and again while he was stepping into his Rolls-Royce Phantom, the city lights reflecting off its polished surface like a celebration waiting to happen. But the voice on the other end wasn't celebrating. It was shaking. There had been an accident. Sudden. Violent. Final. And just like that, the empire he built felt smaller than a whisper. Hospitals don't care about billionaire mindset or stock market millions. The fluorescent lights were cold, indifferent to fortune, indifferent to generational wealth. He ran through corridors that didn't recognize red carpets or luxury lifestyle headlines. Her silk dress, the one she had worn that afternoon, was torn, stained, folded in a clear plastic bag like it meant nothing. A diamond necklace lay on a tray beside her, no longer sparkling under chandeliers but under sterile hospital light. Money could buy the best doctors, the fastest response, the most advanced machines, but not rewind time. He held her hand, still warm, whispering promises he should have made sooner. He told her about the deal he closed, about how their investment empire had just doubled. It sounded ridiculous now, like bragging to eternity. Machines beeped in a rhythm that mocked his heartbeat. "Stay with me," he begged, as if negotiation skills worked with destiny. In that moment, the marble mansion, the Mediterranean yacht, the penthouse suite, none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was her breathing. And even that slipped away. There was no cinematic goodbye, no perfect final sentence. Just a quiet exhale. And silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it fills a life. The man who could move markets with a phone call couldn't move her back into existence. Nurses spoke gently, respectfully, as if handling fragile glass. Someone placed her sapphire ring in his trembling hand. He stared at it, realizing how absurd wealth felt when faced with something money couldn't dominate. The drive back to the marble mansion was the longest of his life. The Rolls-Royce engine purred smoothly, unaware that its owner had just lost everything that mattered. The mansion gates opened automatically, obedient as always. But inside, the luxury lifestyle felt like a stage after the audience had left. Her designer heels were still by the staircase. Her silk dress from last week hung over a chair. A lipstick rested on the marble vanity in their bedroom. Ordinary objects suddenly became sacred relics. He didn't turn on the lights that night. Not because he couldn't afford electricity, but because in the dark, he wouldn't have to see his own reflection breaking apart. In the bathroom mirror framed in gold, he imagined seeing his eyes swollen from crying, and he couldn't bear it. In the kitchen, 2 crystal glasses still stood on the table from the night before. 2 glasses. 1 empty chair. Fortune filled the house, but presence had left it forever. And that's when it hit him, the empire wasn't silent because it lacked sound. It was silent because it lacked her. And as he stood in the middle of that empty penthouse, surrounded by velvet curtains and priceless art, he began to understand something terrifying. The wealth that once made him feel invincible could not shield him from the weight of this loss. And the mansion, it was about to become something much darker than just a home. The marble mansion didn't change after her death. That was the cruel part. The velvet curtains still framed the windows, the chandeliers still glowed like liquid gold, the penthouse still overlooked a city that never slept. But without her laughter echoing through those halls, the luxury lifestyle felt like a museum exhibit frozen in time. Every room held a memory, every corner whispered her name. Fortune remained untouched, generational wealth intact, yet the house felt abandoned. It's strange how a place can be full of objects and still feel completely empty. Her silk dress was still hanging in the corner of their bedroom, dust slowly settling over fabric that once shimmered under red carpet lights. The diamond necklace he had given her rested inside a velvet box on the marble vanity, right beside a lipstick she had used the night before the accident. Even the mannequin in her dressing room stood lifeless, draped in designer heels and couture pieces that now had no purpose. Luxury illusion, that's what it all felt like. Wealth without warmth. Gold without grace. He stopped turning on the bedroom lights at night. Not because he was saving money, that would have been ironic for a man with stock market millions, but because in the darkness, he couldn't see his own reflection falling apart. In the mirror framed with gold edges, he knew his eyes were swollen, red, hollow. So he chose the dark. Sometimes avoiding what you see feels easier than facing it. If you've ever turned off a light just to avoid your own thoughts, you understand exactly what he was doing. The kitchen became unbearable. 2 crystal glasses still sat on the marble island, untouched since that last dinner. He couldn't move them, couldn't wash them, couldn't even stand there for more than a few seconds. He stopped eating at home altogether, choosing instead 5-star hotel dining rooms filled with strangers. It was easier to sit in a crowded restaurant than to face an empty chair in a silent mansion. Luxury can distract you, but it cannot comfort you. He tried sleeping in different rooms, guest suites, the top-floor office, even the media lounge with its panoramic city view. But no matter where he lay down, the silence followed him like a shadow. The marble floors echoed with every step, reminding him that presence had once filled those spaces. Even the private jet hangar felt haunted, because she used to wave goodbye every time he boarded. Now, the jet stood ready, engines maintained, destination options limitless, and he had nowhere he truly wanted to go. He walked through her closet one night, running his fingers over silk, velvet, and lace. Designer labels that once symbolized success now felt meaningless. He picked up a sapphire ring she had worn during Paris Fashion Week and held it against his chest. "I built all this for us," he whispered into the quiet air. "But wealth doesn't answer back. Money doesn't hug you. Gold doesn't wipe tears." And for the first time in his life, the billionaire mindset felt powerless. Standing in the center of that empty penthouse, surrounded by marble, diamonds, and generational wealth, he finally realized something brutal. The empire was still standing, but the reason for building it was gone. And the more he stared at everything he had accumulated, the more it began to feel like debris instead of achievement. That's when he made a decision, not to sell it, not to leave it, but to try to live in it without her. And that would prove far harder than losing her in the first place. At first, he told himself grief was just another phase to manage. Like market volatility. Like a temporary drop before the rise. So he did what he always did. He worked. He reopened negotiations, expanded the investment empire, doubled down on stock market millions. The billionaire mindset came back like armor, polished and cold. If he couldn't control death, at least he could control numbers. And for a while, spreadsheets felt safer than memories. He bought another Rolls-Royce Phantom, even though the first one was barely driven. Not because he needed it, but because buying something felt like movement. He upgraded the private jet interior with Italian leather and custom gold details. He signed a deal for a new Mediterranean yacht, larger than the last one. Luxury lifestyle at full throttle. From the outside, he looked unstoppable. From the inside, he felt like a broken billionaire trying to outrun silence. He started traveling constantly. New York, Dubai, Monaco, Tokyo, penthouse suites became temporary hiding places. 5-star hotels, champagne nights, investors applauding his resilience. People admired his strength, his focus, his discipline. They didn't see the way he avoided going back to the marble mansion for too long. Because every time he walked through that front door, the velvet curtains seemed heavier. The air felt thicker. And her absence screamed louder than any applause. In meetings, he was sharp, calculated, precise. He closed deals worth more than entire companies. Generational wealth multiplied under his signature. But sometimes, mid-sentence, he would freeze for half a second. A cent, a phrase, a memory would hit him unexpectedly. He'd remember her laughing at his first awkward presentation years ago. He'd remember her adjusting his tie before red carpet events. And just like that, the conference room would feel colder. He tried filling the house with noise. Music playing in every room. Staff coming and going. Occasional dinner parties to keep the illusion alive. Women invited by friends who thought he needed to move on. But none of them stayed long. Not because they weren't beautiful. Many wore silk dresses, diamond necklaces, designer heels, but because none of them were her. And no amount of fortune could replicate a soul. One night, he stood alone on the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking the city skyline. The same skyline they once admired together. He held a glass of expensive whiskey, watching the reflection of city lights tremble in it. "I built all this," he whispered to the wind. "Why does it feel like I lost?" Wealth had expanded. Legacy was secured. The empire stood firm. But inside, something fundamental had collapsed. And that's when a terrifying realization began to form. Maybe the luxury illusion had always hidden something deeper. Maybe he had mistaken provision for presence. Maybe God had sent him love first, and he had prioritized the empire second. As that thought settled into his chest, heavier than any diamond necklace he'd ever bought, he began to question whether he had truly understood the gift he once held. And that question was about to change the direction of his entire life. There are nights when success feels like applause, and there are nights when it feels like accusation. That night, standing alone in his marble mansion, he didn't feel powerful. He felt judged by his own memories. The billionaire mindset that once pushed him forward now felt like a voice asking uncomfortable questions. What if the greatest gift he ever received wasn't the investment empire, but the woman who believed in it before it existed? What if God had sent love first, and he had mistaken it for something permanent? The thought hit harder than any financial loss ever could. He began replaying moments he once rushed through. Her asking for dinner without phones. Her waiting on the balcony while he took just one more call. Her soft reminder that luxury lifestyle means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with. He had thought he was building generational wealth for them. But now he realized she never asked for marble floors or private jets, she asked for time. And time was the one currency he couldn't deposit back into the account. In her closet, he knelt one evening, holding that silk dress that still carried a faint trace of her perfume. He remembered how she would spin in front of the mirror, asking, "Too much?" before red carpet events. He always answered, "Perfect." But he rarely told her she was perfect when she wore sweatpants in their first tiny apartment. Wealth had amplified the stage, but love had always been the foundation. Without her, the penthouse felt like a throne room with no queen. He started to see patterns he once ignored. Every major breakthrough in his empire happened after a night when she had encouraged him. Every bold investment came after she reassured him during doubt. The stock market millions weren't built by confidence alone, they were built by partnership. She was the silent strength behind the public power. And in losing her, he didn't just lose a wife. He lost alignment. He found her Bible one afternoon in the quiet corner of the library. He hadn't opened it in years. Between its pages were small handwritten notes, prayers for his protection, prayers for wisdom, prayers that wealth would never replace their connection. His throat tightened as he read her handwriting. She had been praying for balance while he was chasing expansion. She had been guarding his heart while he was guarding his assets. The realization didn't free him, it crushed him first. He had confused provision with love, expansion with purpose. Fortune had grown, but so had distance. And now, the woman he believed God had sent to anchor him was gone. He felt like a broken billionaire sitting on a throne of gold that meant absolutely nothing. Generational wealth could secure his family's future, but it couldn't bring back the one person who made the present worth living. And yet, even in that crushing awareness, something began to shift. Not relief. Not peace. Just a small, fragile understanding that maybe this loss was revealing something greater than wealth. Maybe the empire had been built for a reason he hadn't discovered yet. And as that idea slowly formed in his mind, he realized that living without her would require more than distraction. It would require transformation. And transformation is never comfortable. From the outside, nothing had changed. The marble mansion still stood proud, the private jet still waited on the runway, the investment empire continued multiplying stock market millions without hesitation. Interviews described him as resilient, disciplined, visionary. The luxury lifestyle remained intact, red carpets, champagne nights, five-star hotels. But inside that penthouse suite overlooking the city skyline, something was quietly deteriorating. He was living in luxury and dying in silence. He perfected the art of public composure. In boardrooms, his voice was firm. In galas, his handshake was steady. Cameras captured a confident smile, a gold watch shining under chandelier light. Yet every time he returned home, the silence greeted him louder than applause ever could. The velvet curtains didn't move. The silk dress still hung untouched. The diamond necklace remained inside its box like a relic of a sacred past. Wealth filled every corner, but warmth had vanished. He developed small rituals to avoid pain. He no longer entered her closet. He had the staff polish the marble vanity so the lipstick wouldn't collect dust, but he never moved it. In the kitchen, the two crystal glasses still stood like silent witnesses. He didn't remove them, didn't wash them, didn't replace them. Some objects become memorials without permission. And in that empty mansion, those glasses carried more emotional weight than any vault full of jewels. Sleep became complicated. He left lights off to avoid mirrors, just like before. In darkness, he didn't have to see the exhaustion in his own eyes. He would lie awake listening to the distant hum of the city, remembering how she used to rest her head on his chest. Sometimes, half asleep, he would reach toward her side of the bed. The space was always cold. Generational wealth could control markets, but it couldn't warm an empty pillow. He tried dating once. Just once. A woman from an elite social circle, elegant, poised, wearing a sapphire ring that sparkled almost as brightly as the one his wife once wore. They met at a luxury gala, spoke about business, about travel, about expansion. But halfway through dinner, he realized he wasn't listening. He was comparing. And comparison is cruel when the standard is love that once felt heaven-sent. He never called her again. Not because she wasn't enough, but because she wasn't her. There were nights when he stood on the balcony of the penthouse and stared down at the city lights below. From that height, everything looked small. Cars, buildings, people chasing their own fortunes. He once believed rising above everyone else meant winning. Now he understood something different. Elevation doesn't equal fulfillment. You can own the skyline and still feel completely empty inside. And that emptiness is heavier than debt. But something subtle was shifting beneath the grief. The pain was no longer just sharp, it was becoming reflective. The silence was no longer just punishment, it was becoming instruction. And one evening, while staring at the city that once symbolized conquest, he began to ask himself a question he had avoided since the hospital corridor. If money couldn't save her, and luxury couldn't comfort him, then what exactly had this empire been built for? The truth didn't arrive like thunder. It came slowly, like dawn breaking over a city that had partied all night. He was standing in the library of his marble mansion, her Bible still open on the desk, when it finally settled in his chest. The empire was never the blessing, she was. The private jet, the penthouse suite, the stock market millions, they were tools. She had been the gift. And now, surrounded by generational wealth, he felt poorer than the young man in that tiny apartment years ago. He walked through the mansion differently after that. Not as an owner, but as a witness. The silk dress in the corner wasn't just fabric, it was memory. The diamond necklace wasn't just luxury, it was a moment he could never relive. Even the 2 crystal glasses in the kitchen became symbols. One for what they built. One for what he lost. Fortune had amplified his life, yes. But it had never been the source of its meaning. He stopped chasing expansion for a while. Not completely, the billionaire mindset was part of him, but he redirected it. Instead of another yacht, he funded foundations in her name. Instead of upgrading the private jet, he invested in hospitals that treated accident victims. He created scholarships for couples starting businesses together, honoring the partnership that once carried him. The investment empire didn't shrink, it shifted. Wealth finally had purpose beyond accumulation. But don't mistake transformation for erasure. He still slept on his side of the bed. He still avoided mirrors some nights. He still stood on that penthouse balcony, staring at the skyline, whispering conversations into the wind. Grief doesn't disappear just because you find meaning. It changes shape. It becomes quieter, deeper, more reflective. The broken billionaire didn't become whole again, he became aware. And awareness is heavier than gold. He realized something most people never do until it's too late. Luxury lifestyle is beautiful, but it's fragile. Champagne nights fade. Red carpets roll away. Diamond necklaces lose their sparkle in darkness. But presence, real presence, that's priceless. And when God sends someone into your life who believes in you before the world does, that's not coincidence. That's alignment. That's grace. There were still days when he would walk past her closet and pause. The mannequin still stood there, draped in a silk dress, untouched. And sometimes he would smile softly, not in pain, but in gratitude. Because even though he couldn't buy one more minute with her, he had been given years. Years of partnership. Years of love. Years that built more than wealth, they built memory. And memory, unlike money, cannot depreciate. In the end, he kept the mansion. He kept the empire. He kept the fortune. But he stopped pretending any of it could replace her. He learned that money can build an empire, but it cannot build eternity. And every time he passed those 2 crystal glasses on the kitchen counter, he remembered the final lesson his luxury illusion taught him. You can own the world, and still lose the only thing that truly made it worth owning. So now I want to ask you something. If you had all the stock market millions in the world, a private jet waiting on the runway, a marble mansion filled with diamonds and silk dresses, but the one person who believed in you was gone, would it still feel like success? At what point does luxury lifestyle become just a luxury illusion? At what point does generational wealth stop feeling like legacy and start feeling like loneliness? Tell me in the comments, what do you think was his biggest mistake? Was it chasing the empire too hard? Was it believing there would always be more time? Or was it simply forgetting that presence is more valuable than profit? And now I want to hear from you. What song should we turn into a story next? A story about betrayal? About redemption? About love that survives? Drop the name of a song below, and maybe your suggestion becomes our next unforgettable narrative. If this story touched you, don't just watch and leave. Subscribe to the channel, activate the notifications, and stay with us. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We turn music into life lessons you'll never forget.